Bibliang Palawano nakaratang na tariminan kormat tiu. The Palawano Bible has arrived. Our hands have received it. There's like 10,000 words in here. Every one had to be translated and checked about 10 times over. But it's a good translation and nice pictures too. It's a very nice publication. It's hardcover. So this is built the old way with sewn together signatures and bound. So that's been our work. We work with Wycliffe Bible Translators, translating God's Word into languages of the world, which comes to about 5,000 languages. And they've completed about 1,800 New Testaments and some places entire Bibles. Linda wants to show you some pictures, and then maybe that will help explain a little more about the situation.
I wanted to bring a little bit of the New Testament celebration to you because not all of you could go. In fact, we only had one person from the United States go join us, and that was our pastor from our California church. The rest, I don't know if you can see the bottom line of this poster. This banner was at our dedication, and it says, Biblang Palawano nakaratang na tarimanan karamutju. Receive it in our hands. And the bottom line says, Ipaslad at salad atayju. Receive it, enter it into our livers, into our hearts. Palawanos feel that the livers are the core of their being. So that's why we translated it that way. But it really means, don't just have it in your hands, carry it around. Read it, study it, get it inside your very being. One of the highlights for me of the dedication of the traditional Palawano tarak dance.
Speaking languages, and they don't have any of their language ever been written down. That's not even an alphabet. It's just purely a spoken language. So we have that situation where we were. So we have 3 sons, which grew up there in that situation. We had to learn the language without the help of how you learn a language. You get Rosetta Stone and play those things, and you get language lessons. Well, we didn't have the benefit of that. We basically had to learn another language before we learned the primary language, and that was Tagalog, the national language of the Philippines. English wouldn't have worked. If I said, what is this, what is that, they wouldn't even get past the question, much less give us an answer. So we had to ask them in Tagalog, ano ito, ano yan. Then they were able to give us feedback, and soon we were able to switch to their language, ano atin, different languages. And then we just built up our word list, our languages. So we work in the Philippines, way west of the United States, about 10,000 miles. We may not be at the ends of the earth, but you can see it from our front porch. God led us to this language. There are 170 languages in the Philippines. We looked at about 15 different languages before we settled on this particular one. And, of course, we're praying all the time and looking for God's Spirit to lead us to the right place, because we wanted to be in the right place. This is difficult work. So we settled on these people. We wanted a very remote situation. There were other places we visited. We heard about places where they said, well, it's a fishing community, mostly Catholic, and you'd just be, and you'd do a translation for them. I said, well, I can stay in Louisiana and do that. So we wanted to go to a tribal-type language group, and we did. The village is about 300 people. Average house is about 10 foot square, the wall's about 4 feet tall. You can only stand up in the middle of it. So we built a little bigger house. I like to stand up in my house. We did the 8-foot walls and such, and they were just amazed at the size of this building. And the first structure was 20 foot square, so about the size of a large living room. After a few kids, we added on another 10 feet. We did medical work. There's no doctors there. There's no roads, no electricity, no natural gas to hook up to. It's a third world country, and there's not much available, especially in the outer parts. In the capital city of Manila, you have a lot of those things most of the time, but they still have lots of what they call brownouts when the electricity goes off for half a day or sometimes a week. Where we're at, there's nothing. So we ran the house off of solar panels. We set up a water system to bring it into the village, both for the villagers but for us too. For the first few months, we were hiking up the mountain to get the water in jugs, and we tried to live on about 5 gallons of water a day. That's not even half your shower, probably. Literacy was a problem. People pretty much couldn't read. Only maybe 2% of the village people there could read. So Linda did a literacy class, but it's only one of her and about 30,000 of them. So we did, hoping that it would catch on and get teachers out of there to teach more. It looked good on paper, but we could never get a sustainable teacher out of those classes. A resurgence has happened, and there's now someone who wants to run a literacy program. But that was spurred by the fact that the Bible came out, and he's saying people need to read this, and so you know what, we need to teach people to read. Because they can't read, we have an audio version of the Bible also.
Mateo 10:7. Nakalaway alam ng aldaw, pinawaya Jesus si Pedro, buka ito ang magtipusad na Jacob, buka si Juan. Hinjari, diyain na manungul dut sa batong mabukid na banal, kaya ibang tao doon. Sasat doon tinjanain,
you hear the music in the background?
Dagpas ni Jesus. Timin lang na samat aldaw kanyang rupa, buka namuti samat magsarinaw kanyang badyo. Atin mo na pagrasa diya, ng talong papanganaran.
So quite different language. And when you think of me from Hanville learning this language and writing this book, that's when you got to think, God helped. A few years I really didn't think it was going to happen. But anyway, you just take it step by step. God's got a plan. I said, we'll keep going as long as God keeps making it happen. So step by step, we saw some great things happening. 2001, we did a pre-publication because there were people who wanted to teach among the Palawano. We'd asked New Tribes Mission, because they do more church planting. They do some translation, but they do more church planting, to come. They were overworked also. It's the verse, the work is great, but the laborers are few. New Tribes said, well, we'd love to. You got a perfect situation for us to come and do church planting, but we just don't have the people. But we did do a publication because there were some Filipino pastors and Christian workers who wanted to do the work. So it's in 2 languages. Now we did not translate the Tagalog. That's a version that they loaned to us for the publication. But they just track across each other, verse 10, same both sides, and right down the page. This is so that Filipino people not speaking the language could be teaching and could read the Palawano to them, because it's very phonetic. You could read this and be understood by a Palawano. You may not understand it, but if you just pronounce the words, you would be speaking it. So they would be able to read the Palawano to them and teach. It would be a mix, but it's better than nothing at all. So that's why we did a 2-language version, because there are very, very few Palawano pastors, maybe 10 to 20. We're not sure of how many, but that's for 30,000 people. So we're hoping that more will develop, and we'll see that happen.
After we submitted the New Testament for printing, we had to wait, of course, a while for that process to be done because they had a backlog. So last spring, we were able to do this audio recording that he just played for you, and that was challenging enough to find 25 good readers who could read fluently enough so that other people would be able to understand them and not have, long pauses or sounding out nakaratong. oh yeah, I got it now. Nakaratong na. Okay, that kind of thing. But God again pulled people out of nowhere that we hadn't met before, but our language, our core leaders were recruiting from all the villages, and there was actually auditions to get to this point in this recording room to work for 6 weeks to do the whole New Testament in the recorded version. And that was with Faith Comes by Hearing. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But finally, the New Testament in written form was finished in September 27th, 2014, last year. We had our New Testament dedication, and that's the dancing you saw there as part of the celebration. So after a 2.5-hour service, we had catered lunch, and the tribal health workers who work with the Health Project, which is another story, were the servers. And while that was going on, the New Testament table was open for sales, and with every New Testament purchase, they received a free hymn book, which we had done years and years ago. Just a few Palawano hymns in it, and a free Bible tote bag that my friends in the church group in California sewed for them. This is the next generation of Palawano believers. These children, and many others like them, are going to grow up having the scriptures in their own language. Can you imagine? It's really the first book in their language. There are no Dr. Seuss or, Curious George books. The Bible is the first book in their language. At the dedication also, God's timing was perfect. Both written and audio were dedicated that day. Bible Center churches had a major part in sending us. You were the ones that commissioned us, really, to go since 1982. It took 31 years from the time we left for the Philippines in September 1983 to September 2014. We had no idea it was going to take that long. But God's timing, we can see over and over again in causing that to happen. And so thank you for your faithfulness. What are some of the other things that we accomplished through God's help during that time?
Okay, we ongoing without us now, we were able to build a school. We noticed none of the kids in the school, maybe one or two, would be able to go to school, but they would have to go about 6 or 8 miles, and there's walking. There's no bus or anything to catch. Walking to do that. So sometimes they would just stay with people down below, which meant they're not home with their parents during the week. And that was only 2 or 3 out of maybe 30 or 40 that were eligible to go to school. So we constructed a school, and we found a fellow who had completed 2 years of college, a college graduate among the Palawano. We're talking on one hand, you can count them. There are not many, but we found this fellow, and we said, if we pay for your last 2 years of college, will you come back as a teacher? And he did. He finished the college, and he actually stayed there about 6 or 8 years. He's still a teacher. He moved to a village about 5 miles away. He's now like a head teacher, which is really great. So the school then was first grade, then the next year the first graders moved into second year. And we had at first he was teaching 3 grades at one time. Sounds like the old schools of the Wild West, and the one school teacher and all the grades. Well, some of you doing homeschool too. Similar situation. And then we did get a second teacher and then a third teacher. So they're up to 6 grades now. By that time they're old enough and big enough they can make the journey down to the lowlands to go to school. Another big project is a medical project. You'll see some brochures back there. One statistic that probably was true in the U.S. 100 years ago, 50% of the children die before they reach the age of 5 years old, mostly because of malaria, but also whooping cough, tuberculosis, and just dehydration because of amoebas or different kinds of intestinal problems. Their water is not clean. So that's another project that we were half did. We're not there to do all those things. It's just if we didn't do some things, some people were just going to die. So we did medical work while we were there, but we're not there now. So that's why we have a medical team trying to do what they can, and they're hiking up into the mountains, carrying on some medical work. It really needs to be 10 times bigger, but again, laborers are few, and the resources are few also. And there's a third thing, literacy classes. We're trying to do literacy classes to get that teachers identified and get that going. And then we have listening groups. Now you have Bible studies. You get your Bible study here. The women's Bible study here with Ruth was last Monday. Doing a Bible study, of course, with your Bibles. But again, with the literacy rate being so low, they come and listen to whatever the chapter or that they're working on. And then we've trained, I think it's 10 leaders. 22 leaders, that's great. And they've been trained to say, okay, they'll play it and then ask good questions like, what did we hear? Why did God write this in His Bible? What does He want us to learn from that? And how can we use this in this next week, apply it to our lives? Sounds simple, but anyway, you know it's hard work. So those are going on too, and they're called listening groups. So, yeah, so there's Bible studies. They do have people with Bible studies, but the listening groups are just maybe more common than the Bible, reading the Bible study type. You know, we don't live forever, and we have to leave. So no one replaced us as being from a sending country, a first world country, to take our place. So we're as Clyde said, we're pretty much gone. We still do go back for a month or two a year, but it's not living on a permanent basis. But God's Word is still being a missionary there. It's in print, it's in books, and it will still be proclaimed. So that's the beauty of God's Word. It lasts, as it says, forever.
Dale, you make it sound so easy. Oh. Someone once told us, yeah, you make it sound like you went there, you learned the language, you turn around and start translating, and you had a first book already. But there must have been some problems along the way. You want to talk about that? Some of the difficulties and challenges?
You know, I don't want to talk about it, but I think we should for balance. Or there in our 30 years, it was very hard. And there were times when either I wanted to quit, and she said, no, let's stick it out another year or so. Or she'd say, it's time to quit. Nothing is going to come out of all this. And I'd say, oh, no, let's hang in there a little while. It's a good thing we didn't both feel that way on the same day, but we came close a few times. While we were there, the government changed. We're talking revolution twice. So we've gone through 2 revolutions. There was 8 coup attempts that tried to change it again, just within the government sort of thing. Not as violent, but they were trying to take over the presidential palace, equivalent to our White House, and the Congress and such. And those failed, but still, you have things going on. We had a volcano that covered our village with about a half an inch of white, looks like comet cleanser, just this white ash. Traveled 700 miles from Mount Pinatubo, where people around there were actually, some were killed. And so that shut down the whole country basically for several weeks because that ash, you can't run a jet engine with that in the air. You can't run even a motor. It's not good to be running with that comet cleanser floating through the motor. And the people had never seen that before, and they gathered in our front yard because it happened overnight. And the next morning, the sun came up. I thought it snowed because it was white. And I said, snow in the Philippines. Anyway, they were all there. They thought it was the end of the world, literally. They said, is this the end of the world? And I said, nope. Heard it on Voice of America, which is the only news. You don't get TV or anything down there. The shortwave radio, Voice of America, said, it blew up and ashes over the whole country, and actually some went down to Indonesia. That was hard because we couldn't move for a couple of weeks. It stopped everything. We had measles epidemics that literally killed 30 kids in the village. We were doing the medical work for that. Constantly with malaria. I've had malaria twice, Linda once, and our kids maybe, and we treated them. Malaria is the main cause of death there, and there's mosquitoes everywhere. You think you have mosquitoes bad here? I'd say it's about 5 to 10 times worse there. And they're carrying malaria, dengue fever, and I think there's an encephalitis. So that's all around you. So we sleep under mosquito nets at night, but mosquitoes are sneaky. I had amoeba, and I've had something I didn't know what it was. It was like a migraine headache for like 10 days and just feeling achy. I never found out what that was. It might have been dengue fever or something. I don't know. But that was very difficult. Tabasco sauce got me through that one. Our life was threatened, and not terribly serious, but that sounds serious. So there's lots of things go on, and besides third world countries are just miserable. The roads are bad. There's no sewage, no electricity. It's a hard place to live. No air conditioning, and it's hot like here, humid like here. So all those things, very difficult situation. But God was there, and we got through it. Not always unscathed, but we got through it.
Now, some of you who've known us a long time remember us describing how we actually started learning this language, because he touched on that early in the talk here about you can't check out the Rosetta Stone from the local library and start learning Brooks Point Palawano. So you want to talk about how we initially started learning language? And it was a group that didn't have a written alphabet, right?
Correct. And we could have chosen lots of scripts, like Arabic script, a Roman script, Sanskrit, Chinese. Of course, we chose English because that's what we work with. That's what the computers have on the keyboard. And they needed to learn it because part of our job, and we have an actual contract with the Philippine government, is to move these people into the collective Philippine people. Because as far as they're concerned, it's like the Apache Nation, Cherokee Nation, Sioux Nation. They're a country unto themselves in our country. And these people are a tribal group and a nation of people that they're their own group, and they have really no allegiance to the Philippines. They just happen to be encompassed by the Philippine government owning it. So the government, of course, wants to talk to their people and wants to have them become part of the Philippine society. So we have an actual contract with the government that says that we will produce language lessons, for one, so we can both use that, but a grammar statement about the language, a dictionary for the language, phonology, a fancy way of talking about how the sounds of the language grow, teaching them to read and write. So we're doing, it's a double purpose. We're doing this for them, but we're also, in our spare time, translating the Bible, and that becomes a lot of the literature and dictionary and book and such come from there. The dictionary, we like to have an example sentence, and a lot of them come from the Bible. So it's something explaining a fish net, it says, and the disciples put down their fish nets and to talk to Jesus. And so that's in the dictionary as an example, and you have your translation. We were learning language, and like I said, there's no written source, so we have been trained by Wycliffe. Part of our training is how to learn a language when there's no materials available to do that. And it gets to just asking someone, what is this, and listening for their response. This is, because they don't have books, this in Palawano, this language, is bu'uk. And that's different than book. Book is the sound of a fruit hitting the ground. So it makes a difference, especially to them. Say you wanted the word for a rock, and you say, okay, what is this? And you have a medium-sized rock. Okay, rock. So then you hold up a little pebble. So you're looking for differences. So he says, what is this? And they might say rock. They might say small rock, or they might say pebble. And if you don't know the language, you don't know the difference right away. So, and then you get a really big rock, and they might say heavy instead of big rock or something like that. So it's not always easy just to ask, what is this, what is that? You have to write all these things down, and then you have your list, and you look for similarities, and sometimes you have to throw that out. So no, he didn't understand what I was asking.
You have to be ready to do some acting to get the verbs and action words. Okay, adjectives and nouns and adverbs are fairly straightforward, but then, okay, we have to have a complete sentence to write the New Testament, so we got to move forward. And so, you have to just start acting and demonstrating what you want to do. Now, I was trying to get the word jumping or jump, but they may have said a whole sentence. She's acting like a crazy person. I don't know. But whatever it was, we had to write down the full phonetic equivalent of that stream of speech, and then go back to our desk later and try to analyze it and figure out, okay, what was that they said? And it's a lot of desk comparison and analysis, trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle in some ways.
Then you fast forward that to 15, 20 years later, you're listening. Now you speak enough language, and you give them, this is the Tagalog for this, you read it to them, and they try to give it back to you in their language, and you realize they misunderstood the Tagalog, so you have to clarify that, and then you get it. But then you have had so much experience now, you said, well, you slurred one of your words. You've contracted it down. It took a shortcut. Now, you wouldn't know that in the first few years because you don't know the language. When Jesus told John and Mary, Jesus' mother, standing next to him, he says, John, there is your mother. They corrected me. They said, oh, you got that wrong. He said, there is my mother. But no, Jesus was saying to John, there is your mother. I want you, John, to take care of my mother as if she were your own mother. The other time when they said, love your enemies, and they said, ooh, this is wrong. No, it actually says, love your enemies. Do good for them. Pray for them. We had water because we had a 55-gallon drum that we filled up and kept water, and we would have water during the day, but in hot seasons, the streams dry up and there's no water. So a lady came out in our front yard and says, you've stolen our water. You've got water, and we don't. And she was mad. I said, well, we just keep it in a container here. We've got it and all that. But anyway, my helper saw all this, and when we did that verse, she says, that's what you were doing. You didn't go out there and pull her hair. That's what I would have done.
At first, I can remember writing down a word over and over again, and different people are great at language, being language helpers, and others aren't. Just as it would be here or anywhere. But I remember looking at sentences or strings of words over and over again, and this one word kept popping up, yun, yun, yun. What does yun mean? We couldn't figure it out. And it took us a couple of years before we realized that's like somebody saying,
And we write all these down like you're right. If somebody says, I went to Majora's and I couldn't find a parking spot. And you're writing all this down like that's part of the whole thing. But
that's a very valuable word in there. I can't figure it out.
Whatchamacallit. A lot to learning language that we take for granted.
It's a wonder. God did the impossible,
Really?
helping us to understand it and figure out the grammar system and get it to the point where we could translate His Word and be faithful to it. And we started a Bible study using the rough drafts of the Scriptures, and that's how the church began in the village.
Okay, now a lot of people ask, what version did you use to translate from? We found out after some years, at first we were using like an NIV or New American Standard, but we found that their grammar was very similar to the Greek, and so eventually we were actually going from the Greek. There are some that would say, if you didn't translate it from the King James, there's a problem. But I said, well, how about the Greek? And we do it from that, so that was okay. So that came in very handy, because some problems are actually introduced by the translation from Greek into English, because you can't quite make that switch. So they put some things in English to kind of get around it. But we were able many times to go from the Greek to the Palawano without having to take the rabbit trail through the English versions. We learn about how to do the recording of the language. That's just so you have data. But doing the translation, yes, we had, it's an ongoing training, but you do have initial training about how to deal with the figures of speech. You think about it sometimes. If you try to speak English to someone for a while and don't use figures of speech, you'll find that over half your language is figures of speech. And for some people, almost all of it, even in English to another English person. And the Bible's full of it too. And some places the Bible has actually fixed some things that would have been hard. When Apostle Paul says, "I'm like an aborted fetus," and so nobody likes to hear that. Or I'm like somebody's guts, and so we don't say that either. We put in heart or something that's more compatible. But there's a lot of figures of speech in the English, and they don't transfer to the Palawanos. So you have to figure out what the figure of speech is saying in English. What's the meaning? And then get the meaning into the Palawano. Wycliffe offers it's basically a master's program, about 1.5 to 2 years, and you come out with a master's in linguistics. Now, we didn't do that because I already had a seminary master's, because a lot of countries do not want you to come into their country if you just have a college degree. They want you to have a master's or a doctoral degree, because they have, they say, we've got people with college degrees, you won't add anything to our country. So often we have to go in with a master's degree. So you do have to do some studying for most countries. But there's a lot to it, and it's ongoing. I know that I was a better translator year by year, and had to go back and fix some of the things that I'd done in the first years.
And then there was also the jungle camp training to make sure that we were willing to live in a remote or a situation in a different culture and setting than we were used to, without all the amenities that we enjoy here. But that included part of the medical training. We had 4 weeks of medical work and cross-cultural training, passing exams in Spanish to travel around. For us, it was traveling around Mexico and living with a family for 4 weeks. So that was a whole nother semester of training just for the cultural side of it.
Yeah, I really think being able to live in a third world country with the tribal type people is a spiritual gift. So some people ask me, what is your spiritual gift? And I have to kind of think about it, but even though I don't see it directly in those list of 19 spiritual gifts, I think that's both Linda and I, we're quite comfortable in those situations where I'll be speaking later up here in the next service. I'm going to be very uncomfortable.
Bible Center Church, like I said before, has been front and center in sending us to the Brooks Point Palawano people. And many of you have been praying for us for 32 years or longer. Before you knew me, you knew Dale, some of you. So this is, the heart and home of our foundation of sending partners. And we have a New Testament we want to leave with Bible Center Church as a reminder of God's faithfulness to us and to you all for sending us. And I inscribed it, I said, with gratitude to God and Bible Center Church for making this Palawano New Testament possible. For His glory now and forevermore. Dale and Linda. Because we can't be there all the time, and we'll talk more about that later. Thank you. I want you to use it for Sunday schools and for the next generation.
You don't have to come back and read it.
You don't have to read it. Just show it and talk about it. Talk about the story that God did to get that to this stage and to have Palawano believers who will be joining us in heaven and worship and praise one day. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.